rankings, the last ones last night. Everyone talking about what happened. Is the SEC in trouble? I want you to take a look at where we stand. Top 12, top 4. I nailed that, by the way, didn't I? You see that? Top 4 remain the same. Notre Dame pops up, but noticeably absent. I want you to take a look. You don't see Alabama in there after losing to Oklahoma, probably one of the worst losses of the season. Clemson sneaks in at 12. Boise State still that G5 representative at 11 at 10 and 1. So Heather, Dinich, Paul Finebaum, as they always do, are here to break down the rankings from what we saw last night. Wednesday's the favorite day for college football fans across America to scream. So Heather, I'll start with you. What was your single biggest takeaway we saw last night?
Well, Matt, I think it's that the SEC is in big trouble. Just a week ago, there were 5 teams in the college football playoff bracket, and now it's down to 3, Texas, Tennessee, and Georgia. And the Texas A&M game is now going to feature a team, the Aggies, that are ranked 20th by the selection committee, and a 3-loss team that could go win the SEC. So I think when you look at the big picture with Alabama and Ole Miss playing themselves out, that was the big takeaway.
Yeah, Paul, what about you? What did you see last night that's your biggest takeaway this morning?
Yeah, Matt, my contract does not allow me to say the SEC is in trouble, but I'm going to violate it right here. The SEC is in very big trouble, and it really is their own fault. Alabama did it to themselves on Saturday, literally laying the biggest egg of the entire season, losing 24-3 against a 5-loss team. And then, of course, Ole Miss did it as well. But most people are gravitating to the Alabama story today because even after that, people in Alabama, as you know, Matt, there's still a chance. Today, there's not much of a chance at all.
Yeah, and look, Heather, when you look at Alabama, there's that cluster of SEC teams. You got Alabama, you got Ole Miss, you got South Carolina. South Carolina playing some of the best football in the country right now. But when you look at the Tide in particular, you heard Paul say maybe they're done. Is there any way they get their way back into this?
Well, in addition to obviously winning the Iron Bowl, they have to have multiple upsets in front of them. Multiple. Because if Clemson loses to South Carolina and Alabama gets bumped up by default to that 12th spot, they would still be out of the college football playoff because the 5th highest ranked champion would get that 12th seed if they are ranked outside of the committee's top 12 on selection day. So you can name your upsets here, but they need at least 2. Miami losing to Syracuse, Notre Dame, USC, whatever way you want to stack it up, they need lots of help and a prayer.
Yeah, and look, it's been a season where we've seen upsets each and every week that you don't expect, so that's not out of the realm of possibility. Heather, staying with you, Indiana, first-ranked game a week ago, Ohio State, they get bludgeoned in Columbus. However, they drop down to 10. In your estimation, are they a lock to get in?
They are, barring some catastrophic loss to a bad Purdue team. Yes, because in the top 10 is the safest place to be. They're at 10, and they're not going to get bumped out by anybody. So, yes, Hoosiers are a lock.
Okay, Paul, your contract does stipulate you can rip other conferences that aren't the SEC. So I'll ask you, is the committee overvaluing the Big Ten?
They are, Matt, but at this point, the fake outrage needs to go away in honor of and deference to Thanksgiving because it really just doesn't matter. You can quibble about Indiana's schedule, but they navigated the season very well. They lost that one game to Ohio State. The committee helped make excuses for them. But the SEC a minute ago killed themselves, so you can't get too mad at the Big Ten when the SEC fell on its own sword. So committee's fine with me today. Happy Thanksgiving, people.
Wow, look at you. A day before a holiday, Paul's all happy and cheery. The committee, maybe thankful for that. Heather, ACC, we talk about this every Wednesday, whether or not they're going to be a 1-bid league, a 2-bid league. Can they get 3? There could be a path for 3 now. Walk us through that.
There could, because now that Miami and SMU are both top 10 teams in the committee's eyes and Clemson is sitting there on the bubble, it increases the chances of the loser in the ACC championship game staying in the bracket. And then you have Clemson. If Clemson beats South Carolina, what they need to do in the eyes of the committee, though, would be bump up ahead of Boise State in the ranking. Because if you look at the ranking on the left there, Clemson is the first team out. And again, if you are in that number 12 spot, you get bumped out for the 5th highest ranked conference champion, which today would be ASU out of the Big 12. But if they're above Boise State with the South Carolina win, Boise State would be 12 ranked and the 12th seed. They would both be safe.
All right, Paul, headed into the final regular season weekend. Can't believe we're already at this point. Map me out the beautiful chaos that could exist in the final regular season weekend.
Well, it starts with a lot of craziness out west. What if Notre Dame goes down to Southern Cal? Heather mentioned the South Carolina-Clemson's game, obviously Miami going down. But South Carolina-Clemson, Matt, is really interesting because even if Clemson loses, South Carolina has a case. You mentioned it a minute ago, but they have been outstanding the final couple of weeks of the season, and I would look to them with some consideration. Now, they lost that head-to-head to Alabama, but they played better than Alabama, Ole Miss, and all the other schools in the SEC begging to get in the tournament right now.
I'm not putting anything past anyone this college football season, especially since Paul Finebaum woke up in a good mood today and had nothing negative to say about the committee. Everyone can turn over a new fall leaf. Paul Finebaum, Heather Dinich, we'll see you next hour. The CFP rankings released last night. The top four stayed the same for the third straight week, but a chaotic weekend brought plenty more changes to the playoff picture. Noticeably absent for the top 12, 8-3 Alabama. They plunged from 7-13 after that stunning loss to Oklahoma on Saturday night. And I've prepared 5 burning questions coming out of last night's rankings, and Paul and Heather are going to be here with me. So question number 1 for Paul. Is it low tide? Barry's burning question number 1. Is it low tide for Alabama?
Matt, you know the answer. It is. This was supposed to be another great season in Alabama, in spite of Nick Saban leaving to go to TV instead of finance and Kalen DeBoer coming in here. And it hasn't been. Inexplicable losses to Vanderbilt and to Oklahoma, 2 5-loss teams, unranked. And right now, Alabama is on the outside of the playoffs, and they need a lot to happen, Matt, for them to get in.
And it's been a season, Heather, where a lot has happened. So what is Bama's path to get back into the playoff mix?
Well, it starts with obviously winning the Iron Bowl, then going to church and saying some prayers, and then hoping that multiple upsets above them happen. Because even if Clemson loses to South Carolina and Alabama gets bumped up by default to that number 12 spot, they would be out of the college football playoff, assuming the Big 12 is the 5th highest ranked conference champion and would get into that 12th seed at the expense of Alabama. So they need multiple upsets above them.
Those 3 SEC teams, Ole Miss, Alabama, South Carolina, bunched together, so it's going to take a lot for any of them to get in. And, Paul, this next Barry's burning question, I'm actually setting you up for success. It's Thanksgiving. I wanted to make sure you succeed. Is your beloved SEC being overvalued?
No, they're not being overvalued at 3, Matt. I mean, there's a chance for 4, but, I mean, this is still an outstanding league who just happened to have a terrible weekend at the worst possible time, but it's the deepest league in the country. It's far deeper than the Big Ten. It just so happens that there's been so much unpredictable carnage that the contenders all fell right when it really mattered most. But the schedule did them in, where other leagues play cupcakes almost every week.
It'd be interesting to see those 8-3 teams that are clustered right there, what they would do or what Vegas would say about them going up against one of the Big Ten teams ranked inside the top 12. So, Heather, for you, how many SEC teams are going to wind up getting in the playoff?
I think 3 is the right number, and that's what's in there right now with Texas, Georgia, and Tennessee. Like I said, it would be really difficult for Alabama, but you could still have a 3-loss Texas A&M, which is ranked number 20, win the SEC. So that sums up where the league is right now.
Yeah, and look, again, we've seen chaos for 3 months, not to say that it won't happen again and someone sneaks in. Okay, Heather, this one's for you. I just asked it to Paul about the SEC. Is the Big Ten being overvalued?
I'll say no to that, because if you go past the top 2 teams in the country, Oregon and Ohio State, Matt, you could literally poke holes in every single team all the way on down. Who did they beat? Who did they beat? I mean, this is the reality of where it's at. And I challenge anyone at home watching this to sit down and do your own top 25. And I guarantee it's going to be pretty darn similar to what the committee had.
Yeah, Paul, outside of Oregon and Ohio State, I don't think anyone's arguing they're bona fides, 2 of the best teams in the country. But overall, is the committee showing too much love to the Big Ten?
I think they're being inconsistent, where they're saying schools like Penn State and Indiana are highly valued, even though their schedule has been extremely weak, especially Indiana. And then Indiana lost big against Ohio State. The committee looked past that. Well, a couple weeks ago, they sent Georgia reeling after an Ole Miss loss. That's my biggest issue. But ultimately, the Big Ten probably deserves 3. They'll get 4.
Yeah, I think 2 of the teams that get picked on the most in the Big Ten, Indiana and Penn State. Penn State ranked high at 4. So we'll see how that plays out down the stretch. And Heather, we've talked about this a couple of times. Is the ACC still a 1-bid league?
No, it could be a 2 or a 3 bid league. Now, the fact that the committee has 2 teams in its top 10 with Miami and SMU increases the chances that the loser of that championship game is still in the college football playoff. And then you have Clemson sitting right there on the bubble at number 12. And if they get a win against South Carolina, then they could potentially bump up ahead of Boise State. That's what they would need to happen, because if they stay at that 12 spot, again, they would be out of the college football playoff for that 5th highest ranked conference champion. But if they're ahead of Boise, Clemson would be in and Boise State would be in as the number 12 seed.
And caveat, if Miami loses to Syracuse this week and then Clemson is also in the ACC championship, which would garner an automatic bid. So, Paul, if Clemson gets a win over South Carolina, would you put them in?
I would, and I know there's criticism. Heather doesn't like their schedule. I don't like their schedule that much, but I think they've grown as a team since that embarrassing loss week 1 against Georgia. And Matt, beating South Carolina really matters. That's an unsung team. That team lost to Alabama in the middle of the season and has played brilliantly since. And that's a significant win. I think it would be enough to get them very close to the playoff.
I would say Clemson's low point, though, the beat down against Louisville, where they just weren't even competitive at all. But again, it's a 12-team playoff. Some teams have to get in, and that includes the group of 5, Heather. Will the group of 5 and all of this have the last laugh?
Only because they'll get that first round bye, I think, ahead of the Big 12. But I don't think the Big 12 is going to be excluded from this, because at the end of the day, who you play in your conference championship game matters. That looms large, and I think they have a better chance to impress the committee than Tulane against unranked Army.
Paul, which G5 team do you think is in great shape?
Yeah, it's pretty obvious Boise State. They've had a really impressive season. I mean, the idea that they could get a bye is pretty remarkable. It looks like Brett Yormark is going to have to beat his chest a little harder and talk a little louder to prop up his league at the Big 12.
Hey, look, and when you talk about the group of 5, Tulane's right up there, which is a natural segue to allow me to promote the game tomorrow night. I'm on the call with Dan Mullen. Tulane, Memphis, 7:30 Eastern, ESPN. See for yourself when Neek wakes up from his Cowboys-Giants nap. Also, Saturday, SEC on ABC, college football rivalry. What a game this will be. Tennessee taking on Vandy. You got the Iron Bowl, Alabama, Auburn, and then for the first time since 2011, everything at stake, Texas and Texas A&M.